Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I am a little bit under the weather today, so you're going to probably hear some sounds in the background and playing in the background a little bit because the 6-year-old is in the room. He kind of has that kid intuition when his mom is sick. He wants to follow and be in the same space. So didn't want to not bring a message because I wasn't feeling well because this message is too important, but also wanted to name that if things aren't making sense, charge it to my head and sickness and not my heart because there's a lot of heart behind this podcast. So when you're thinking about parenting, oftentimes our vision for parenting is to be a perfect parent. And one thing that I know for sure is that doesn't exist. So we want to be this model of parenting that really is not even a thing. Something that I say all the time is you'll never be a perfect parent, but you are the chosen parent for your own children. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to get it right. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to make parenting mistakes. But what it does mean is that the attributes that they need and the character that they need to move into their journey in life is going to come from the things that they learn from the system that they're in. So oftentimes, even when I'm thinking about the most negative of things that happened in, my childhood or other people's childhoods, um, I think about the fact that there's a purpose even in that. And I know that's really hard to fathom. It's like, how can the bad thing have a purpose? But there is a purpose even in that because if God is ordering our steps, there's purpose in everything. So that thing that was developed based on the parenting that you received or the parenting that you're going to give is something that that child needs to go into their next phase. It is not me advocating for any type of abuse or things that are just unfathomable. I do think that they build things, but I also think that they children can do without those things. Like they deserve to and can prosper in a healthy environment. And so this is not an excuse to behave poorly in parenting. So don't take it as such, but it is really just thinking about if you're trying to be a perfect parent, you're actually damaging your kids with that perfection. And I've experienced it. I've also done it. And so I just want to share with you some of those lessons that I learned. Before I even start though with the points, I really want us to think about the fact that our kids are not an extension of us. And so sometimes I really despise when people are like, "Oh, that kid is really productive. He must have had really good parents," or "She's doing big things. She must have had really good parents." And when I think about a lot of the productive people that I know, some of them did have really good family operating systems. And some of them, their productivity is a response to not having those family systems. So I think about the musician Jewel, and if you haven't heard her story, her book is phenomenal, and she's on podcasts where she explains the childhood that she experienced, and it wasn't a good one. It was abusive, and there were a lot of aspects of her childhood that would not have made people think that she was going to be a productive adult or even, that she would have been a rebellious and just off the rails teenager. And so I think sometimes we attribute it to the parents because that's the way our society functions and that's the way we think. It's like if someone is good or does good, then it must be from their family system. And that's just not true. And that is also what produces the idea and vision that if our kids aren't doing the things that we think they should, and if they aren't on the path that we would have hoped for them, then somehow that means that our parenting wasn't good enough or that we weren't the type of parents that they need. And that also is not true. I mean, there are going to be places that you fall short, and that's going to affect your kids. I mean, that's just the nature of being a human being. But every failing of your kid is not yours. And let's be honest, sometimes you might deem it a failure when it's really a success for them. And every success of your kid is not yours. And sometimes we like to judge the process and then latch on to the success when it happens because that feeds our ego. The reality is, our kids are these autonomous human beings who have plans and purposes that are outside of the family system that they're raised in and outside of what we like to do, which is live vicariously through our kids. That's not the way it works. So when you see these children who take these paths that are like crazy different from the parents that they had, that should show you that it's not all nurture. Like sometimes it's just nature, like something is innately in them to make them take that journey and path. So I just really want to name that before I start talking about some of the things that I've experienced as far as perfect parenting goes, just because I think that when we rest in this society and what it says is normal, and we're in this phase of life where it's like everything is productivity and what does it say about you, and we're all trying to prove something with our highlight reels. We just need to get real. Like the realness is that everything isn't about you. And even though they're your children, it's not about you. Sometimes it's just what's in them, and they should be celebrated for that. And they should be guided in that and not pushed to the side or condemned because they didn't follow this plan that you thought for them. If you look at a lot of like artists and musicians and you look at their past, or even people who are just super productive people and you look at their past, a lot of time it comes from dysfunctional family systems, right? They come from dysfunctional family systems. And I'm not attributing their success to those dysfunctional family systems, but what I'm saying is stop making it about you because it's not, right? Like you do the best with what you have and you give your kids what you deem that they need. And then you watch them flourish or you watch them make mistakes and pray for them and know that they're going to fall into the plan and path that is for them. Sometimes I see people like, oh, well, her son didn't graduate from college. So like, what kind of parent is she? Or her son didn't, graduate and go into the field, or he couldn't make it in the college that he was in, or like just all these judgy things. Well, just because you accept that as your truth, that if your kids aren't productive, then it means something about you, doesn't mean that everybody does. And I don't accept that as my truth. I accept that I have to guide them and help them along the way, but that their path is their path and their journey is their journey. And I can tell you that for me, some of the greatest lessons that I learned in life were a result of not having my parents there and having to figure it out. And that is just the reality. And that's not to say that they weren't there, but during the times where they just said, I'm not doing this for you, or I'm not supporting you in this, that's when I figured it out the most. And that built the best character in me, the tenacity and all of those really good work ethic skills were adopted because of not having somebody to fall back on. And so I don't attribute those successes to my parents. I attribute them to me. And that's what we should be doing. We should be encouraging our kids. It's like when we say, I'm so proud of you, as if something that they've done says anything about you, or as if they're supposed to seek that external validation from you. It should never be, I'm so proud of you. It should always be, you should be proud of yourself. Like giving them permission, because oftentimes we don't. We think that the way that we're raising them is helping them be productive, but it's productive for external validation. It's not productive because they have this innate internal sense to be able to and want to do those things. So they should be proud of themselves, and they should be proud of themselves for things that maybe you aren't even proud of, right? Like a lot of times when those musicians are going through the process, or comedians or people like this that we look at and we're like, oh my gosh, they're so famous and they're so good at their craft. They weren't always. And oftentimes that's when their family systems leave them because they're like, well, I told you to go into this field. And so, I think about Jay Shetty. He had parents who were from a culture that said, doctor, lawyer, banker. And if you're not one of those things, then who are you? And he found out who he was, and he's one of the highest paid speakers, and he's super successful as a result of him following his passion and his purpose. That's not attributed to his parents. It's a process that happened as a result of them not accepting him and his autonomy, but it's not attributed to them. So Something that we have to remember as parents, and this is the first point, is that when you act perfect and then you hurt them, guess what? Then they think there's something wrong with them. So if you walk around acting as if you're not human, what you say is truth, how you act is truth, who you are is truth. That doesn't give your children the ability to think, okay, this person is going to make mistakes too. And so if something happens and they get hurt in the process, they're going to think something's wrong with them. And oftentimes those type of parents who want to portray the image of perfection are banking on that. So they can use it as a way to manipulate and shame their children into obedience, because in our society, obedience is the ultimate goal. It's not about them flourishing in who they are. It's about, are they being obedient and what we deem respectful to the systems that they're being brought up in? What if the system is broken? And furthermore, what if the system is broken and it's pretending like it's perfect? So you have this adult who has lived in that system their entire life, never knowing that it was broken. And every time something went wrong in that system, they deemed it to be their own fault, because when they were hurt, it couldn't have been that their parent is just operating out of their own pain. It had to be that something was wrong with them because their parent was held on such a pedestal. They were the hero. They could never have done anything wrong. And the parent in that situation is just feeding off of that logic because it benefits their ego. My kid doesn't think I do any wrong. Let me tell you what happens as a result of that. Your kid always thinks that what they're doing is wrong because you never approach them with your humanity. And so how do we correct that? Well, they must know that that you're human so that they can be. And another disclaimer, I'm not a perfect parent, and I'm going to say that until the cows come home. I make a ton of mistakes, but these are things that I've learned from being a child and also from being a parent. If you walk around acting as if you're perfect, they will feel like everything that goes wrong is their fault because it couldn't, in fact, be yours because you're perfect. And then you teach them to lack humanity. So they walk around being people pleasers. They walk around just self sabotaging because they think they're going to ruin it anyway. And all of that is a result of you not being human to them. They have to know that you are human so that they in fact can be. What does that look like? It looks like, I just screamed at my daughter. Now I'm going to go tell her, listen, that was a really poor way for me to react. I reacted in my emotion. It was not because of you. This thing still makes me angry, but I should not have reacted that way to you because that's not fair. What I should have done, and in the future, what I will do is calmly express my, feelings toward you or whatever. What does that do? It says, oh, my mom makes mistakes too, and she can apologize. And in this house, we can make mistakes and we can apologize for them. And so I can be human, and it doesn't affect my ego and it doesn't make me insecure to make mistakes. It, in fact, is a part of normal everyday life. And if you're walking around thinking that I have to present them with a model of perfection, you're doing it wrong. And that might be harsh, but it's the truth. Your kids need to know you're human. They need to know that you make mistakes, and they need to know what that looks like. So when their internal narrative says, I made a mistake, they don't do the thing where they say, oh my gosh, you're so stupid. What's wrong with you? But instead, they do the thing that says, okay, I made a mistake. In the future, I'm going to course correct and do this thing. The second thing is, there is no greater anxiety than realizing that your entire life is a lie. And I say that from experience. So if you're in a family system where your parents act like they never fight, your parents act like there's never any dysfunction inside the home, your parents don't make normal things normal. So the relationship is perfect, their image is perfect, everybody thinks they're perfect, and you believe it because you're a child and you don't know any different. What happens is, when that image is cracked or broken, the level of anxiety that you feel when your life is now being shown as an entire lie is, I don't even know the word, suffocating. It is suffocating because now you feel like, who even am I? How can I walk into this world not even knowing who I am? And how do I prevent that same thing from happening? And you develop, the emotional walls, and you don't know how to be in healthy relationships because you fear it. And so for me, like my parents were married my entire life until I was 22. And I know that oftentimes people say, well, we're going to stay for the kids. Well, I'm a product of what happens when you stay for the kids. I literally thought their relationship was perfect until it wasn't, and I knew that it wasn't. So at 22, when they divorced, I had the most debilitating anxiety that I've ever had in my entire life. I'm talking like going to the emergency room at least once a week, thinking that I was dying, not realizing that it was a result of me not having any certainty in the stability of my life because I had rooted so much of who I was in their relationship. Is that their fault? No, but it's a result of that system. Is it something that they could have done differently? Of course. Because had they just shown us the reality, like don't put them in your kids in the middle of your arguments, but you can show them how to functionally have one. You can show them what disagreements look like. You can show them what a functional relationship looks like. You don't have to give them this idea of perfection because when it all comes crashing down, and it will because we're humans, they are the ones who are going to receive the brunt of that emotional dysregulation as a result of it. And so, what can you do? You let them know that stability exists in humanity, right? Their stability exists in the fact that humanity is a thing. You are a human, you make mistakes. This relationship is human, it's going to have mistakes. There isn't always going to be this like perfect cookie cutter image, and you rest in that and you show them what to do as a result of it. I'm really mad right now. And so I'm not going to react to these emotions. I'm going to respond later. Or mommy and daddy are just having a disagreement. This isn't an argument. This is how you do a healthy disagreement. You know, I don't like the way this thing is happening. And so I'm going to call you out on it as a mom to her child. And when they see that healthy interaction, but they also know that it's not perfection, it's humanity, that feels stable. So then when they go out into the world and they have disagreements and they're not going to be these people pleasers who shy away from confrontation because they know how to do a confrontation well because it was modeled in their household. If you continue to think that showing them a image of perfection is going to in fact make them have a perfect relationship, you're doing it wrong. And I say that from experience because they will never be able to obtain or attain the goal that you've created for them because it's not real. So then when they go out into the world and they can't be in a functional relationship, well, no wonder because they think in order for a relationship to be, it has to be perfect because that's the model that you gave them. Show them humanity because the thing that is true in every situation that they'll be in is that humanity exists. And if they feel stable inside of a human system that has those moments of conflict and can do fierce conversations and can do healthy conflict, when they walk into the world, that will feel stable to them. And that's how the world exists. They're going to have to be confronted with that. And the last one is they'll never be themselves or seek your guidance because you're perfect, not real. So when you go out here presenting yourself as this perfect person and perfect parent, you do everything right, you don't show them any type of humanity inside of you. They, one, will never be themselves in front of you because they're going to feel judged. They will not feel like they belong in that system. So they'll go out and be this whole other person in the world. But what they'll show you is a version of them that is most palatable to you because that's what they think you want. They will never be themselves. They won't come to you with things. They won't talk to you about things. They won't share things that are going on in their life. They won't ask you advice because why would you go to somebody who's perfect so that they can see your imperfections and judge you for them? They're not going to do that. And they know, they know when they get older that that isn't real. So now they feel less trusting of you because you presented this image that was fake. So why would they go to somebody who's basically lived a life of a lie and ask for anything? They're not going to do that. So what can you do? Autonomy is key. Listen, kids need to know that what they feel is okay to feel. They need to know that what they think is okay to think. They need to know that any type of impulsive response or reaction to something is okay to exist inside of them. And then they need to know the correct way to respond to that. How do you not react and how do you respond to these things? Like for instance, I had a conversation with my daughter the other day and she was like going in on this situation and she just listed all, and I asked for her for her thoughts. I said, well, how does that make you, what does that make you think? And how does that make you feel? And I didn't say a word. Now, had she said what she was saying in that conversation to the adult that she was thinking it about, then I would have been like, whoa, pump your brakes, right? But I let her go. How did she feel? What did that do for her? I mean, and she was going off. And at the end of it, I said, all right, what might be some humanity that exists inside of that situation that might make this person react and respond that way? And we talked about it. What things might be coming up for her? How might what you're doing exacerbate that thing? What can you do as a result of that? How can you have a conversation? I never once said to her, thinking, feeling, or voicing these concerns is disrespectful, because it's not. It would be disrespectful to go to this person and just lash out at them. But feelings aren't disrespectful. Emotions aren't disrespectful. It's disrespectful when you actually act on the thing. And so we had this conversation about it, and she saw something in the other person that she may not have seen before based on me just saying, I understand what's coming up for you is this. Let's try to look at this from an empathetic lens and see what might be coming up for the other person. We had this whole conversation about it so that she could envision it differently. Did it change her emotions? No, but I wasn't trying to change her emotions. I was trying to get her to understand that the response could be more empathetic and loving. And also, she was still okay to have her own feelings. And so when we do stuff like that and we give kids autonomy to feel their feelings, then it allows them to be and exist, which is what they're wanting. They want to feel like they can be and exist with the people who should be safest to them. But if you're not safe because you're a lie of perfection, then they're not going to do that. And autonomy is so key because it's not going to damage your image more than it will their emotional state. So oftentimes we think if we just let our kids be, think, and do what it is that they want to be, think, and do, that that's going to damage our image. But in reality, you not giving them autonomy is going to damage their emotional state far more than them having the autonomy and acting, being, and doing will your own image. And sometimes we're so worried about this image that we portray out into the world that we forget that these are tiny humans. And so if these tiny humans are being parented in such a way that they can't go out into the world and be human, then now you're producing more adults who are so concerned about their image that they can't. Hi, buddy, go sit. Told you he was a little concerned with the way mama's feeling. But we're going to produce people who are going to go out in the world and do that exact same thing to their kids. And so what's the reality of this? The reality of this is it is not about you. Parenting is not about you. Parenting is all about them. And so if you're trying to be a perfect parent, then what you're going to produce is emotionally starved children, because it ain't about you. Your parenting is 100% about giving them what they need when they need it. And the only way to figure that out is to stop trying to be so perfect and start trying to be present. Try to figure out what they need. Try to figure out what you can give them and be that instead of being what you think the image says you need to be. And I'll leave you with this. If you're one of those people who has ever treated your children, disciplined your children, or done something with your children while you were in front of people that you never would have done behind closed doors because you're trying to impress people with your parenting skills, you need to self-assess. You need to think about, why am I trying to impress people with the amount of discipline that I am putting onto my children, instead of impressing people by saying, I don't care what you think, because I'm going to give my kid what they need. And if you deem me a bad parent for that, watch me. Watch this kid turn into somebody who is emotionally capable of dealing with their lives. Because what my generation has is a whole bunch of people who are seeking out therapy because they don't understand how to function in this world, because the parents that they had existed in a space of being productive, doing more, being more, and not being able to go to therapy as a result of it. So we have a generation of people pleasers, narcissists, codependents, etc. And if we don't fix it, we're going to produce more children who are people pleasers, codependents, narcissists, etc. So I encourage you today to take some sort of parental self-assessment. If I could talk, it would be great. Where you say, okay, what are some things that I'm doing as a result of wanting to be this perfect parent. And how might I transition those things into what my kid actually needs or eliminate them? Something that I do, and I do this at work and I tend to do it in my personal life, is do I need to alter it? Do I need to abandon it? Or do I want to accept it? So if I'm accepting it, that means I'm keeping it because it's working. If I'm altering it, it's like I like parts of it, but I need to make some changes to it. And if I'm abandoning it, I'm not doing that again because it is not functioning for me or this environment. So I encourage you to do that today. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that this is not me giving you advice from a stage of a perfect parent. It's just me sharing with you my experiences and hoping that it helps you when you're navigating this parenting journey too. If you haven't already, follow me on all social media platforms. Tune in every Monday to the Peace Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you're someone who's healing from a toxic relationship, whether that be a romantic or family one, go ahead and click the link and sign up for my free webinar, which also in turn could allow you to work with me one-on-one individually to assess some of those situations and get you to a place of thriving in the power of peace. And that's what I want for you guys, just a life of peace. So again, thanks for tuning in. You're amazing. I will see you next Monday, and hopefully I will not still be sick then. Thank you.